You're listening to Bottomshelf Bitcoin. This is episode 46.
Relax. Enjoy your coffee. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Take a chill pill. Okay.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Bottomshelf Bitcoin, the podcast that puts Bitcoin knowledge within everyone's reach. As always, I'm your host, Josh Humphrey, and today's going to be a little different. I don't have a guest with me today. I thought I'd do something fun and read some Bitcoin-related fiction. So I've got one story that I wrote that I'm going to read on here, and then I've got another that's a kind of a humorous thread from Obi-Wan Kenobi about the recent Libra launch. So with that said, we'll jump in. I'll do mine, and then we'll break for sponsors, and then we'll come back and do the thread from Obi-Wan Kenobi. All right, here we go. The story that I'm reading of mine is called The Signal. The command went out, and 3 drones immediately obeyed. They lifted off from the hive, the insulated carrying case and central transceiver, and began spreading out in roughly triangular pattern. As he watched them go, he began to calm a little, the easing of anxiety that comes when you take action on something instead of just worrying about it. Part of him kept saying he should have deployed them in breadcrumb mode, trailing out at intervals when cell signal first started dropping out, just in case he needed them. No, he told himself. That wouldn't have worked this long. The batteries in the individual drones would only last a couple of days at best. Then they would have to return to the hive to recharge. He and his family had been out here for 6 days and had chosen to stay an extra few, which is why he was in this situation in the first place. It would only take a few minutes to override the message once the connection was established, but he didn't know how long that would take. There were many variables. The normal speed of the drones and the distance to the nearest tower, of course, but also the direction and speed of the wind, as well as elevation and landforms that might help or interfere with the signal or flight. LEDs on the next row in the hive lit up for a few seconds to let him know that the next wave was about to activate. His heart rate picked up again. It's just 2 sets, he told himself. That makes sense for how long we drove out. He flinched as the props began to whir and the drones lifted off. The first set had reached their range limit, so a second wave of 3 would follow the first, serving as a relay for signal and commands. Once one of the drones found sufficient cell signal, it would alert the others through the chain to the hive, which would then call back those that had gone in fruitless directions. He checked his watch. 30 minutes. That was stupid. He shouldn't have checked. Now he was trying to stop his mind from racing through the sequence of events that would occur if he couldn't get through, and the possible consequences of those events. His watch beeped, notifying him that his heart rate had hit the aerobic range. The most immediate consequence would be final message sending out an encrypted email to a specific email address, whose sole purpose was to receive the final message, decrypt it, and then set off a cascade of other automated messages. Recovery seeds for his Bitcoin addresses would be sent in varying amounts to several parties, along with a message that he was missing or dead. He would be back in signal range within a couple of days, so unless they swept the Bitcoin and then spent it within that time, he could prove he wasn't dead and get all or most of it sent back to him by people he trusted. The more long-term consequences would be the other messages. Twitter, Gab, Keybase, GitHub, and more. The pre-made notification of his death or compromise would be posted to all of his accounts, meaning anyone following or communicating with him would drop those connections. All of his code from recent commits would be meticulously scrutinized for bugs, backdoors, or other sabotage. He had a personal account, but his dev work was under an anonymous handle, meaning to prove he wasn't dead, he would have to dox himself, and many may not believe it was truly him. Even if they did, they'd never trust his code again. Years of reputation destroyed because he wanted a few extra days of vacation. He was sweating, even though it was probably only 65 degrees out here. His heart was racing, and it felt harder to breathe. Stop! He forced his mind to come to a halt. This was exactly why they had come here in the first place. She had begged him to pick a place that would help him calm down, relax. She had always supported his work, been his biggest encourager, but she saw him losing touch, and said he had to find some balance. The endless online debates, the frustration over unchecked governments waging monetary and actual wars, the fight against utter nonsense that took seconds to spew but hours to debunk, it was getting to him. His health was crap. He knew he should be eating better and exercising, and maybe if he lived around others working in these circles he might, but there was nobody physically around to help him fight off the convenience of freezer meals to fuel the late-night coding sessions. They had come to the mountains to get away from all of that for a while, and he really had been enjoying it, been better, less edgy. He looked around at the beautiful landscape before him. It was truly breathtaking. The sky was a vibrant blue with just a few clouds. He was sitting on a rocky outcrop overlooking a valley. Across the valley, mountain peaks thrust up into the blue sky, reaching to the heavens, immense and covered with patches of green and gray. Farther down the valley, he could see the reflection off the water of a small lake. He and his son had gone fishing there for 3 days in a row. They were some of the best times the two had ever spent together, laughing, talking, even just sitting in one another's company, enjoying nature as father and son. In the farther distance loomed the dark gray shadows of mountains, the kind that made you feel small because you knew how immense they must be given their distance from you. A breeze blew in his face. Yes, this place was amazing. He took a deep breath in and let it out slowly, his heart rate returning to normal. He jumped as the third wave of drones whirred to life and his calm was shattered. He hadn't seen the LEDs light up and his heart dropped as the realization hit him that the second wave hadn't been enough. He had really hoped he wouldn't need a third wave. The drones were having to push farther out than he'd expected now. At this distance, the area inside the triangle was rather large, and there was a possibility of significant gaps in the coverage, meaning cell signal could technically be within that triangle, but not picked up by the drones. Maybe he should have done 2 waves of 4 to get the better coverage within each wave. Of course, if he had hit the limit on the second wave, he would have had to decide which drones to keep at that distance and which would have had to move over to extend the reach of each branch, putting him in the same position he was in now. Too late to worry about it now. If the third wave hit its limit, he'd be in real trouble. At that point, he would have to choose one direction and begin shuffling the other 2 chains back to bolster that one. A gamble. He'd never liked games of chance. He was terrible at poker and despised dice games, though he was willing to take some risk if he could justify a reason to himself. He was the type to overanalyze even the most mundane situations because he hated losing. Risk, chess, games of strategy were his preference, though few would play with him because he took an insufferably long time to decide each move. He wouldn't have the luxury of time if he waited. He checked his watch again. 10 minutes now. The panic began to set in. He was breathing fast, shallow. His chest was pounding. He was sweating profusely. No. Calm down. Panic doesn't help. If you panic, you will drown. Break it down and find something you can actually do. He closed his eyes and breathed out slowly. He wouldn't be able to wait until the third wave reached its limit. At that point, it would take too long to call back the wayward branches and reallocate them in the chosen direction. He needed to do it now, so he would have time to get them back and moving to support the primary chain. He remembered the map. The nearest town was southeast of here. The highway ran east-west through the town. North and west of him lay only mountains and forest for hundreds of miles. That was dumb. Should never have sent anything that way. Then he caught himself. Self-flagellation won't help. Just fix it now. He opened his phone app and connected to the Hive's command program over its local wireless network. He told the 6 now, drones that had gone roughly northwest and northeast to stop and head south to southeast. The 2 that had just left would be closest and become the foremost of the support group, with those who had left earliest probably still not making it back in time to be of any real use. That couldn't be helped now. LEDs on the Hive blinked yellow as the command went out, and then green as the drones began to obey. What else? What can I do now while I wait? He ran through the steps in his head, pulling out his laptop and putting the phone back in his pocket. Pull up the final message page. That had to wait for connection. Log in. He could have the username and password pulled up in his password manager, ready to copy and paste. Everything after that required him to be on the site, he decided, so he waited. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Then it buzzed again. He pulled it out. He had been carrying it as a combination of habit that was still hard to break, as well as the best camera he had for this trip. Several apps were updating. He cleared the notifications as usual. It took another 10 seconds for him to process. Signal! He heard one of the recently deployed drones fly nearby and head south, but he didn't bother to look up. He typed in the address and hit return on his browser, but nothing happened. It still said no connection. He hit refresh several times. Nothing. His brain began to flail about for answers. He clenched his fist, rotating his forearms, accidentally causing his watch to light up and show the time. 4 minutes now. Please, he begged aloud. He saw the jet stream of a plane in the distance and thought of the cruel irony that the people on the plane probably had better connection nowadays on a plane than he did right now. Airplane mode! He had put the laptop in airplane mode, hoping it would eke out a few more minutes of battery life in case he needed to dump pictures off his phone or something. He turned on the Wi-Fi, connected to the Hive's network, and tried again. Success! He logged in and clicked the message renewal. An invoice appeared and he paid it. Thank God they take lightning payments. He breathed a sigh of relief and felt his body relax. He switched over to the Hive control app and sent the command for the drones to return home. He heard a twig snap and turned around. His wife was standing there with a cup of coffee and a puzzled look on her face. Hey. Hey, he smiled at her, basking in the relief. You okay? She asked, looking at the Hive. She walked over and handed him a ceramic mug full of coffee. He took it, sipping and noting the grittiness he had come to expect after a week of her camp coffee. As he stood there blowing on the coffee, the last drone returned to the Hive and landed in place. He closed the lid and fastened the latches. Yeah, he said, I'm okay. Then he smiled at her. Come on, let's go make some breakfast. Okay, so here is the other thread from Obi-Wan Kenobits, and he dropped this, let's see, today, which would be June 19th, so I'll put a link in the show notes so you can go read this if you want. It's a thread, and then I just, someone had used Threadreader app to put it all together, which is a much nicer way of reading it, so here we go. I've traveled to the future, and things are looking bleak. I beg you to stop Libra. Libra provides an immense amount of, quote, liquidity to Facebook's platform. Payment data is collated, fractionated, and monetized at vast multiples to the stablecoin's face value. In-feed shopping and messenger payments create eerily accurate and personalized behavioral profiles. These profiles are sold and resold, rehypothecated, along collateral shopping chains. Shopping bots swap, steal profiles, and have swamped the web. Shipping networks crisscross the planet, simply moving goods for the sake of moving them. Think of it as wash trading. Economic output is computed using a basket of metrics pegged to social scores and shopping. Shopping as a production output is measured in products flow to stock. High flow and low stock implies captive consumer cohort. Libra's velocity is unparalleled. Facebook user metrics dominate financial network reporting. Warehouses disgorging rivers of boxes are, quote, things of beauty, and roads congested with Fesla rig bots are, quote, a sight to behold. P.S. Fesla is a subsidiary of Facebook. Rig bots are autonomous trucks. Predictive shopping has become predictive shipping. Ship now, shop later is the new Silicon Valley mantra. Items arrive at your doorstep even if you hadn't thought of buying, dropped off by Famazon drones and Fubers. P.S. Famazon is a subsidiary of Facebook. Fuber is FB's fleet of last-mile delivery vehicles manned by ever-ebullient upsellers. High-frequency shipping is the practice of dropping small quantities of finished product to determine if the recipient has a buy order. Needs are preempted in real time by nodes mining Google's personal data. Shoppers shape product design, guide development, and even have a hand in pricing. This illusory freedom is addictive and has created a vast network of minions beholden to a handful of social influencers. Libras are publicly rated based on transaction value inputs and outputs. Branded wallets are highly sought after. Tainted and socially weak addresses can be hashed out of the network, forever locking funds. High time preference is pervasive. Every Libra is pre-spent and accounted for in advance of earning. Debt is the public's wealth. Sharing and shopping acumen are the only paths to social status. Nations and government entities have been reduced to renting Facebook networks seeking Libra arbitrage opportunities to fund their cyber wars and welfare states. Libra's vast influence has degraded culture. People pour plant and meat powders into 3D printers building meals. Artists are reduced to rendering product previews, and novelists pen reviews. Heavy lifting is a 12-hour search, shop, and share binge. Libra allows Facebook to engage and subvert the populace at a subconscious level. Value is no longer expressed in emotional or familial terms. Self-greed is pervasive. Savings are shirked. Libra Consortium members enjoy willful control over a public which unknowingly surrendered its will. If we know what you want, we'll tell you what you need. I have shared a small part of a dystopian Libra-powered world. It doesn't have to be like this, though. We have a way to stop it in its infancy. If we each sacrifice a little bit each day, we can realign our present and generate a future that is run by better money, by Bitcoin. So anyways, I thought that was pretty funny, and great stuff. If you haven't read, I'll see if I can find it and put it in the show notes. It's kind of almost even a parody of, there was an old, I think it was a Bitcoin Talk forum post, or maybe it was on Reddit. I'll have to find it. That was kind of like a look from the, dystopian future of someone who was a time traveler talking about how bad things had gotten because of the like a dystopian future created by Bitcoin, because Bitcoiners lived in these citadels and everybody else was in poverty, basically. So I'll see if I can find that one and link it too. I'm not going to read it, but anyway, you guys be sure and follow Obi-Wan Kenobi and enjoy that little thing there. I don't know if you guys saw, there's also, I'll put the link in the show notes too. Someone already put if you haven't been following Libra is Facebook's new cryptocurrency. They dropped their white paper a couple of days ago, and it's not a blockchain. It's not really even a cryptocurrency. And there's already several government organizations that are trying to stop them, and it's a mess. But it's really funny because, they have a repository on GitHub, and somebody put in a pull request that's basically talking about this huge security vulnerability because there's only 10 validator nodes, and their pull request essentially replaced the whole thing with Bitcoin code. So that's pretty funny. Check that out. Okay, well, that's really going to do it for this episode. It's kind of a short one, but I hope you got at least a little bit of entertainment, if not some thought-provoking out of it. I'm working on a couple of other short stories, so hopefully I will get those finished, and between other interviews, I'll read those on here. If you have a story or some fiction you're working on and you want me to read it, or you have ideas you want to bounce off somebody, DM me. I would love to read over it. I think that's something that we're deeply lacking, is just kind of inspiring stories, whether it's utopian or dystopian or just Bitcoin kind of is in the background and it's just a good story. We need, and I shouldn't say we need, it would be nice to have some good stories that feature Bitcoin. So hit me up if you have any better ideas on that. All right. As always, you can support the show first and foremost by sharing it and subscribing so you don't miss any episodes, and then spamming all your friends on the internet with the links to the show. You can go and drop me a tip at LNcast and tip per episode that way. You can go to bottomshelfbitcoin.com/donate to find other ways to support the podcast. And then don't forget to follow me on Twitter at bottomshelfbtc if you're not already. And I guess that's going to be it for this week. For Bottom Shelf Bitcoin, I'm Josh Humphrey. Thanks for listening.